Hello there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. How are you? How many of you drink? How many of you know anything about absinthe? Well, hopefully after this speech, you will. Absinthe is a very strong, very interesting spirit. Absinthe is very strong, misunderstood alcohol that if you're ever going to try, you need to understand. As a person who has previously done research on this topic, I was already familiar with the research. First, I would like to talk about how the distillation process is different for absinthe than other spirits. Then I will talk about the truth behind absinthe, and lastly, the rich history of absinthe. Absinthe traditionally is made of white grapes. However, when white grapes became unavailable due to phylloxera, which killed it, it was made from grain, molasses, or sugar beets, before returning to using white grapes. Then plants are added to the alcohol. According to the Difford's Guide for Discerning Drinkers, absinthe has grande wormwood, green anise, and Florence fennel, also known as the Holy Trinity in the alcohol, before being redistilled one or more times. Every distiller has their own recipe for the mix of plants they use, and they are very secretive about the recipes. Some of the additional plants used are plants like petite wormwood, mint, star anise, coriander, juniper, nutmeg, and small amounts of cinnamon. All of this distilling and redistilling of the alcohol produces a spirit that is between 110 and 144% proof. To put that into perspective, most vodka is around 80% proof. The last thing they do is add more plants to steepen the alcohol, releasing their flavors, their oils, and their chlorophyll, giving the alcohol its traditional green color, or as they call it, vert. Now, absinthe without the chlorophyll is called blanche, or le bleu. Now, there are a lot of myths out there about absinthe, like, for example, that it makes you hallucinate, that absinthe makes you violent and crazy, and that wormwood makes absinthe deadly. Let's start with absinthe makes you violent. There is only one reported instance of absinthe-related murder, where a man murdered his entire family with an axe. I know, that sounds bad, but the man had been drinking absinthe all that morning and all of the rest of that day. Not to mention, he probably drank it the days prior to that, too. Remember, absinthe is strong stuff, so no wonder he went a little crazy. His brain was swimming in absinthe. Next, let's kill two birds with one stone. Absinthe does not cause hallucinations due to the wormwood. What makes people think that wormwood causes hallucinations is a compound called thuja, which is the toxic compound in wormwood. However, according to how stuff works, the level of thuja found in absinthe are so low that you would probably die of alcohol poisoning long before you ever reach toxic levels of thuja. So what does make absinthe dangerous? Well, it's the fact that it's so alcoholic. According to John Strong, ethanol, which is essentially alcohol, breaks down your body's tissues, causing tissue damage to the organs. This is why alcohol should be drunken in moderation. According to absinthefever.com, absinthe was originally created by a French doctor living in Switzerland named Pierre Ordinaire. In 1792, the recipe was then bought by Major Dubiet. The drink was primarily produced in both France and Switzerland. The drink then quickly became popular among the aristocracy, until in the 1850s it found popularity with the Bohemian movement of artists, performers, and freethinkers. After a while, absinthe found popularity with everyone, despite social class, in part because of the phylloxera outbreak of the 1870s, which caused the price of wine to skyrocket, making the cheaper absinthe more popular. This is due to the fact that in this time period they added wine to their water to help purify it of all the bacteria living in the water. When they could no longer add wine to the water, they simply added absinthe. In fact, it was so popular that by the year 1910, France was consuming a whopping 36 million gallons of absinthe annually. Absinthe really is the thing that crossed the class divide of Europe. In 1878, it was reported that 7 million liters of absinthe was imported to America. Clearly, not only did absinthe cross social class, it crossed cultures, and it even crossed the Atlantic. So how exactly do people traditionally drink absinthe? Well, they start with a special glass that they would put just a little in the bottom of the glass. They then place the slotted spoon on top of the glass with a sugar cube on top of that. Lastly, you drip ice-cold water on top of the sugar cube, slowly diluting the absinthe. This is known as la louche. Due to its popularity amongst the artist communities, it's been enjoyed by many notable people, like both Presidents Howard Taft and Theodore Roosevelt, as well as Mark Twain, Oscar Wilde, Aaron Burr, Walt Whitman, and even Aleister Crowley. Today I've talked about, and hopefully you have learned a lot about, absinthe. Absinthe. I've talked about how absinthe is distilled and processed, the misconceptions and myths associated with absinthe, and finally, what has been the fascinating history of absinthe. What I hope you have gotten out of this speech is a new respect for spirits, and not to be scared to research something new, because you never know what you will find out. And perhaps the most important thing is to drink in moderation.